Have you ever found yourself, just dealing with an incredibly frustrating neighbor, battling internal temptations, or maybe just feeling completely overwhelmed by the anxieties of modern life? It's so easy to feel like these are uniquely contemporary problems. But what if the solutions to our modern, hidden struggles were actually clearly laid out over 1,400 years ago?
Welcome to this explainer. Think of it as our digital study circle, designed specifically for those of you wanting to extract some really profound meaning while studying the Arabic language. Today, we're going to translate and visually unpack timeless Arabic texts from the biography of the Prophet Muhammad. We aren't just going to be reading history here, we're going to be decoding clear, actionable spiritual lessons for our everyday lives.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with an introduction to prophetic stories, then cover harming the neighbor, the mother of evils, the congregational prayer, turning to God, and finally wrap it up with some core spiritual takeaways. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Introduction to Prophetic Stories.
When we look at these classical texts, we aren't just memorizing historical events or, practicing vocabulary. Take a look at the Arabic phrase here, al-ahdaf at-tarabawiyya, which means the educational goals. We're really looking past the basic narrative to find the why, the exact moral and spiritual education the author intended for us to grasp.
Moving right along to Section 2, Harming the Neighbor. This one addresses a super relatable social problem. The Arabic text recounts the story of a man who came to the prophet complaining, and I mean complaining bitterly, about the harm his neighbor was causing him. This wasn't just a one-time thing. It was an ongoing, daily source of stress. The man was basically looking for an intervention, right? A way to just make the pain stop.
So the prophet's solution here was highly unconventional and honestly deeply psychological. He tells the man, go and put your belongings in the street, like right out in the open. Why? Because this public display of hardship essentially weaponized social pressure. Imagine walking by and seeing a guy living in the street with all his stuff. You'd ask what happened, right? Well, upon learning about the neighbor's abuse, the whole community started to curse and condemn the bad neighbor. It literally forced him to immediately apologize and change his behavior. Now, for our language learners out there, I really want to highlight a crucial word from that text, mata'ak. It means your belongings, your furniture, the intimate things you use inside your home. So, exposing your mata'ak to the public street, that was the ultimate visual demonstration of just how bad the neighbor's abuse had gotten. It proved that the victim's own home was no longer a safe sanctuary. And the whole point is captured right here in the educational goals of the story. Harming a neighbor isn't just some social faux pas, it's an absolute spiritual crisis. The text explicitly warns that abusing a neighbor invites the curse of society and by extension the curse of God. It completely shatters the very foundation of community.
Let's jump into Section 3, The Mother of Evils.
Now we're shifting gears from external conflicts to internal temptation. This source text details a pretty terrifying narrative. It tells the story of a very devout, worshiping man from the past who was lured by an immoral woman. She completely trapped him, setting up this situation where he was cornered and basically forced to make a terrible, impossible choice if he ever wanted to leave. And this brilliantly illustrates the real psychology of temptation. So the man was locked in a room and told he wouldn't be allowed to leave unless he committed one of 3 sins. He had to kill a young boy, commit adultery with the woman, or drink a cup of wine. Desperate, the devout man analyzed his options and chose what his mind told him was the smallest and most contained sin, which was the wine. But once he was intoxicated, his inhibitions completely vanished, and he actually ended up committing the adultery and murdering the boy anyway.
Notice the really powerful Arabic term used here, al-khaba'ith. It means the absolute worst of evils, or these deeply destructive, foul sins. The text refers to alcohol specifically as the mother of al-khaba'ith. And you can see why, right? Because compromising your intellect and losing your mind inevitably kicks the door wide open to every other destructive sin you thought you were perfectly safe from.
The spiritual takeaway here is absolutely profound. Satan doesn't usually start by asking you to commit the ultimate sin right off the bat. He works in gradual, tiny steps. The text warns us to never, ever underestimate small compromises. The second you cross a boundary you convinced yourself was minor, your spiritual defenses are dismantled, and the major sins just naturally follow.
Up next is Section 4, the congregational prayer. This next story tackles something we literally all fight against at some point, physical laziness. The Arabic text introduces us to a blind man who came with what sounds like a very reasonable request. He had no guide to lead him to the mosque, the path was notoriously difficult, and he just wanted permission to perform his obligatory prayers at home.
At first, it actually seemed like he was granted the excuse. But as he turned to walk away, the prophet called him back and asked the defining question, "Do you hear the call to prayer?" When the blind man answered yes, the prophet delivered a strict but incredibly profound response. He said, "Then respond to it," meaning, if you can hear the divine invitation, you have to make the physical and spiritual movement to answer it, no matter how hard it is. A really great vocabulary phrase to pull from this is yorachis lahu, which means to grant someone an exemption, a concession, or, a free pass. The blind man was actively seeking this exemption. But the core lesson is that in matters of absolute divine connection, worldly inconveniences, even severe physical ones like being blind without a guide, just don't automatically grant you an exemption from making the effort.
Moving on to Section 5, Turning to God.
This final narrative focuses on a completely universal human experience, and that's overwhelming anxiety. The text addresses those moments of severe, crushing constriction in our lives. It teaches us that while it's totally natural to experience grief, the absolute ultimate refuge for a believer is to urgently turn their affairs over to God through direct supplication or dua.
The educational goals distilled from this text remind us that prayer isn't just a ritual where we robotically recite words. It's an active, desperate turning of the heart to the divine when literally all our worldly solutions have completely failed us. It's the ultimate expression of complete reliance and total trust in God to help us navigate our deepest hardships.
Which brings us to our final section, spiritual takeaways.
We've covered some incredible ground today, haven't we? Notice how these seemingly simple, everyday physical actions actually carry massive, life-altering spiritual weight. I mean, putting furniture in the street wasn't about interior design. It was about exposing a real injustice and demanding accountability. Drinking one single cup of wine wasn't just a minor slip. It destroyed human reason and unlocked the door to murder. And a blind man walking to the mosque wasn't just a tough commute. It was the ultimate proof of supreme devotion to the divine call over personal comfort.
Learning the Arabic language through these texts reveals that spiritual growth isn't just some abstract concept floating out there. It's deeply, intimately tied to our daily actions and choices. So I want to leave you with this final thought as we wrap up our explainer today. Take a hard look at your own life. Which of these prophetic solutions, whether it's setting firm boundaries, avoiding those sneaky small compromises, pushing through physical laziness, or urgently turning to God in distress, which one are you going to apply to your own hidden struggles today?